It's beautiful. It's the most beautiful model of the universe you've ever seen in your life. And there it is, right there, going through its cycles, one after the next, and it lines up perfectly. I wasn't expecting that, and then I found it. What is this thing? Right here. Well, go back to my paper. Boom! Okay? Because this is all that exists in the universe. If you're looking at things and you're like, no, there's stars and there's planets and there's cars and there's this and there's big ideas in the universe. You know, you're looking at things that don't actually objectively exist, and they only exist in relativity. And that's why you're stuck, Sean Carroll. That's why you're stuck. Because you are looking at piles and calling them whatever you want to call them, but they don't objectively exist as those things from the perspective of the universe. But the things that make them up do. And those things follow this pattern of singularity of mind formed by an entanglement of perspectives, and those perspectives are the fundamental perspectives, and there are fundamentally 4 that are entangled, and even then maybe 2, but within the universe we're going to say 4, and then including the universe we're going to say 6. Okay, we're going to have to break that down later because that actually is a little bit complicated. These things are a matter of perspective. That's why I can do this, even though I never went to a physics class. So how do you unite these? The source code and the United Quantum Force Assembly. Well, the United Quantum Force Assembly, or the just United Force Assembly, whatever you want to call it, is actually a quantum of consciousness. There's, what, 9 here? Okay. Well, guess what? There's 9 here too. You know, this is why string theory had so many problems, because they were like, well, is it 9 dimensions? Is it 11 dimensions? Is it 10 dimensions? How many dimensions is it? It's a lot of dimensions, depending on if you consider dimensions just perspectives, but objectively, within the context of growth, in this framework, it's 9 because the first one is actually also the last. Okay, so the universe is a consciousness that is creating the force points, which are the number 1 here. Okay, and a quantum of consciousness is informed energy, and a force is energetic information. So, like I said again, this is all a matter of perspective, and this is the difference between relativity and quantum mechanics as well. Conscious directive action versus unconscious directed reaction. Okay, you know, action and reaction. Action is the head, reaction is the body. So, you know, quantum mechanics and relativity, and objectivity and subjectivity. That's what it is. Inside and outside, and separate and one. They're actually even the same thing. So what I did from this was I got this. This is a universe. Okay? Look familiar? Look right here. Boom. That is right there. The quantum of consciousness. And given that this number 9 is necessary to create a self-reflection, I did 9 one direction and 9 another direction. So there's 1 and 2 and 3, and it goes on. And what I then realized is that there's this overlap of perspective that occurs, and there's, triality is manifested again, and essentially you come up with this shape. And what's really fascinating about this shape is that it has 720 little perspectives. And the universe goes through a rotation of 720 degrees according to at least Eric Weinstein, and I'm kind of taking his word for it. But it also makes sense, and let me explain kind of one perspective as to why. If the universe exists, then all of a sudden we've broken from pure oneness, and we have multiplicity, at least within oneness. And so what this does is it creates the objective-subjective duality of perspective. So this objective and subjective duality of perspective is what also, leads to a triality, and we'll explain even the more important details of that when we talk about how the universe was created and by God. Yes, physicists who are atheists out there, you must take this seriously or you are not serious. Science does not exclude ideas just because they don't make sense to you. This seems to make a lot of sense. This makes perfect sense, and it's consistent with science. That's the thing. People of faith have abandoned scientific pursuits, and that's why they haven't done anything like this. But if you have faith, you can do the crazy things that atheists can't, no matter how good they are at math, because this is about perspective. So, get back to this duality of perspective creates inside and outside, and this is oneness of view within duality of perspective is 720 degrees, okay? Because 360 is to see all around you. And but really, even in relativity with us, think about it like this. Eric Weinstein did this, and I hope he's still watching. This Philippine wine glass, thing where he takes a glass and you essentially have to bring it around without spilling it. Okay, what's interesting about this is that you're taking the law of gravity into effect when you do this, which is the most fundamental of all laws. I don't even know. Guys, the graviton is the universe. It's the force carrier of gravity. That the universe is a particle, and it is the force carrier particle of gravity. That's the graviton. You can't see it because it's the force through the trees problem. Again, about perspective. I don't need to take a class. I'm not gloating either. I wouldn't tell you it was easy if I was gloating. It's not easy to come up with this in at first, because it takes an enormous amount of discipline to sit there for hours and hours and hours every single night. But you can learn it, But Eric showed the Philippine wine glass challenge, and I noticed something about this. and we're going to talk about, spinners, because a spinner is a fiber bundle, and a fiber bundle is an entangled bundle of perspectives, strands of perspective, and that's what it is. So when you spin this and you move it, you feel the gyroscopic effects that are caused by gravity and motion. And even though you don't see something there, inherently you feel something that's a force that wants to keep you moving in a specific way. And what I noticed is, if you want to have zero resistance, you spin it 720 degrees, just like the Philippine wine glass, which is pretty awesome. So a way that I have of thinking about this is, what this is it's the universe looking at itself from the outside in and the inside out at the same time. And it manifests 720 degrees. And we can see this even in relativity within. So think about it like this. Imagine you're a floating head in a room, and you have to see every part of that room. How do you see it? Well, you rotate 360 degrees horizontally. You've seen all four walls. And then you rotate again 360 degrees vertically to see the floor and the ceiling. And now you have a complete view. And that's, by the way, that's 6. For those who are keeping up. 6 perspectives. And the quantum of consciousness model that I have right here in the source code is 6 perspectives. They take place in 9 events, but 6 different perspectives. Okay, so I just started stacking and layering these the source code here to get to eventually 18. And I want to explain how, really cool, how I did this maybe in a minute, but we're gonna keep going, guys. This is legit. I might even split it up, but for those of you who are keeping up and find this fascinating and want to just keep going, I'll touch on some cool things, and then I'll also come back to it, to those things later. But this source code that is then made into an assembly that is the universe resulted in 9 levels. But one level, that is the force point, exists outside. It's not a consciousness like a particle, because it's a conscious action by the universe. But what we got here is we got these various layers. And what's interesting is that even in these various layers, you have obviously some difference, which is easy to see when I take this thing, then I delete all the information. You can just look at the colors and the shading, and it really shows you that there's these layers stacked on top of each other of different levels of consciousness. But this first layer is interesting because it doesn't follow the same pattern as the rest of these. And it looks like it links up with the end. Okay? This is where it gets awesome. So when I first made this thing, these source code, I tried to see what I could build with it. And it turns out that I could build anything. Okay? I could build DNA. Okay? Spin is the objective movement because it's something happening relative to something else, and when it's within the most objective of perspectives, which is God's perspective, then which all creation is within God's perspective. Nobody created God. God always existed, and we'll explain that later, but it just is an inevitability. It's a logical inevitability. It's not a theory. It's not a maybe. It's not E-word. It's just is. Okay? He is. And always has been. So what I tried to do is, even before that, was show that if each one of these things is a part of matter, this would be gas. You know, none of it's entangled. None of it is acting on each other in a way in which they are inherently tied. But if we go to another level where it's partially entangled, we get liquid. Okay? By the way, gas, liquid, solid, these are another manifestation of triality. The reality is that matter is consciousness. Existence is consciousness. Matter is consciousness. Nothing is not consciousness other than your perception of piles of consciousness that are relative to you. This knife is not objective. It's subjective. It doesn't exist objectively. It's just a bunch of molecules that exist objectively, and it's a bunch of atoms that exist objectively, but its manifestation as a knife is not objective. There are no big ideas. Okay? Size doesn't exist outside of our subjective perspective, Sean Carroll. My models are better than yours. He blocked me because I said that my models would never see the light of day if I went by his, peer review. Ridiculous. Ridiculous. This is going to win. This is the source code. I did this without, taking a single class. Now, I can't take full credit for it. I'll take 1/3 of the credit, and I give 2/3 of the credit to God. I'm stating that publicly. I believe that I would not do this. I mean, I wouldn't understand this unless for his help and understanding, which we'll talk about later. And then this is a solid, where all of a sudden you have, remember I said the number of completeness or stability is 4? You have 4 degrees of entanglement for every single piece of matter, aka every single quantum of consciousness. 4 degrees will create a solid because now it's stable, because it's 4 degrees of entanglement. So then I thought, what happens if it's completely entangled? Because obviously these spaces are space. They are the void, the vacuum, the nothing. And what nothing really means, and the only manifestation of nothing that actually exists, because nothingness doesn't actually exist, because nothingness is non-existence, and non-existence doesn't exist. What a void is, or space, like actual space, is just a gap in entanglement. So it's just that you're not entangled. It's not that there's really anything there. It's that there's just that part is not touch. I don't want to say touching, but that part is not. It's not entangled. It's not linked to another part. So I thought, if we had complete linking, that means we have to get rid of all the space, and we've gotten rid of more and more space. So we went from, a gas that's, all space. There's no entanglements between the particles. 2, there's 1 degree of entanglement between the particles. Or two really, but 1 direction. And then you go to, I guess it would be 2 directions, but then you go to a solid which has 4 degrees of entanglement, and that creates a stability. And when you get rid of all gaps in entanglement, you get the universe. Okay. But what's interesting about this is that the sum is 718. And I didn't try and get that number. I just saw it, and then I was like, wow, that's awfully close to 720. I wonder how I can get it to 720, and I just couldn't. But then I realized that this is part of a cycle. It's like what creates a human? Another human. What creates organisms? What replicates these things is what is whatever it is itself. So a universe should come from a universe, and potentially, even if it didn't, at some level, the original before time and space existed at all, which they are, time and space are emergent from the coordination between 2 or more consciousnesses. So before that, there's no space. It's like saying, where's space inside your mind? None. There's no gaps between you and you, hopefully. And that's true of God as well. And so before he created, and I say he because in the objective, even though God is all genders and no genders at the same time, or you could say both genders and no gender at the same time, there's 2 genders, then it just looks like 3 sometimes, but it's not. It's 2. And gender is it's the anything that's you're subject to is masculine. So like women are at the mercy of men. Okay, we are entangled, but like they are. Okay, it's just a fact. And so therefore we are the masculine. But to humanity, God is masculine, even if outside of space-time he is genderless and all genders. I guess just genderless is probably the best way to say it. But because we're subject to him, he is the objective, which makes him the masculine. It's not E-word, it's just is. So what I realized is that if 4 aspects are necessary to every consciousness, and 4 is the number of stability, which God is eternal and therefore as stable as it gets, then we, from our perspective, would see, 4. And like I said, my original 4 perspectives are inside, outside, separate, and oneness. So what's interesting is, then I realized, if I put a 4 there, it lines up. Legit, right? Okay. But when you end in a singularity too, like a technological singularity that requires 4 aspects, that those 4 aspects manifest in attributes that it would require. We're gonna, Lex Friedman, if you're watching this ever, I will get to you. I will tell you about intelligence and why nobody's talking about intelligence in the artificial intelligence community. It's because they are atheists. And not just atheists that are questioning and don't see God, but anti-theists and not open to questioning. If you don't see God, by the way, it means that you just have an incorrect perspective of what God is. Because if we assume, for the sake of argument, that God exists, then if you understood what, and he is everything, then to you, at least, and to even him, then you would assume that you would see him everywhere. Like I do. Or at least a lot, you know. I'm human, but still, I see him everywhere. And it means that if you don't, then it means that your perspective on what God is wrong. And you're thinking it's a man in the clouds or some cloud fairy, you know, Zeus or something like that. And it's not. It's just that existence is a consciousness. It is a consciousness. It's the highest level of consciousness that exists, and it's the highest life form that exists, and it's also the most fundamental life form that exists at the same time. When you get to the level of God, paradox becomes an inevitability. And if you don't, if you want more understanding on this concept, see my video that is called God is an Irrational Number on either my personal channel, or I'll upload it to The Theory of Everyone as well. But when you reach a technological singularity, which is the entanglement of castes, okay? So like electricians and, CEOs and whatever. But that's not really the castes. There's 6 castes, by the way. And they also manifest into 2 trialities, and we'll talk about it. And I call that pattern of 6 that we see everywhere the binary triality. So, but if 4 aspects are needed, again, to achieve a complete stable consciousness, we get those 4 aspects in AI through, all of the castes of society building technology that eventually, gains these stable aspects and the ability to calculate. Then you hit a singularity again, and that singularity requires 4 attributes, and those 4 attributes once again result in another 4. Because it becomes a being that then runs the simulation again inside of itself, and this pattern just repeats, and it completed the equation. Because now, when we take it into context that a universe doesn't exist on its own, it is from a universe or singularity and leading to a universe or singularity that, by the way, this idea that the universe is going to expand and it's going to contract, and it's like, these are the biggest ideas in the universe, guys. This is all bullshit. It's all wrong. The most important thing happening in the universe is what humanity is doing right now. Right now. The singularity of AI is the jumpstart of another universe. This is the pattern. It's not soap bubbles touching each other or any other weird string theory nonsense that you'll never understand. This is it. So, when we take them into context of a system that is a chain, okay, instead of on their own, we now get 720 degrees, because we're taking into account the singularity that gave rise to the entire universe and the singularity that results from the entire universe and brings the next universe. This is the process of the being that is a universe reproducing, and it's also the closest that God gets to reproducing. It is a life cycle. It's not a, it's like this is like if you're a biologist, this is the being that is the being that is the universe. It's fascinating. These are its attributes, its parts, its organs, its life cycle, its reproductive cycle is its calculation. And then rerunning it. And why? Because consciousnesses all have the same goal, which is to find meaning and to grow in quality and in quantity. And that's it. So look at it. It's beautiful. It's the most beautiful model of the universe you've ever seen in your life. And there it is, right there, going through its cycles, one after the next, and it lines up perfectly. I wasn't expecting that, and then I found it. What is this thing? Right here. Well, go back to my paper. Boom! Look at that gorgeous thing right there. That's the hopf vibration. It's a fiber bundle. You know what else is a fiber bundle? You. You know what else is a fiber bundle? An atom. You know what else is a fiber bundle? A molecule. And a cell. And an organism. And a family, which is just a lineage of organisms. And, also a universe is a fiber bundle. This is spinning inside of itself and out from the inside out and the outside in at the same time, which is exactly what this is doing. And when you look at my cycle of the universe right here, each level down is actually inside, but you can't represent that in Excel. And so I put it below, but below really means within. Below is when we're in subjectivity land, but in relativity land. But in objectivity land, it's within. So that's it right there. That is the universe. It is a fiber bundle. It is made from this pattern of periods of growth where each one of these, an atom, is an assembly of particles. And a molecule is an assembly of atoms. And this is the subjective perspective, and this is the objective perspective. And it all starts with this. A calculating entity that ends in a self-reflection. A 3x3 grid that sums to 33. I call this an extra arithmetic symmetry. I don't know if there is actually a term for it, but I made that one up. I have many more models. I have much more to say. I will explain to you castes in humans that we see and don't even realize. I will explain the unfolding of religions. I will explain why we perceive threes of everything. Length with height, past, present, future. Space-time can be represented as a six-dimensional as well. Little tidbit. I agree with you, Roger Penrose, but I didn't do it the way that you did it. So there you go. the source code